What if the kingdom of God wasn't just a future hope waiting somewhere beyond the clouds, but a present revolution that demanded immediate action, turning every decision, every conversation, and every relationship in our lives completely upside down? What if following Jesus meant more than admiring his miracles or repeating his stories, but required us to embody a radically different way of living that challenges every comfort, every cultural expectation, and every selfish instinct we carry? Welcome to the teachings of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, a message so bold, so unflinchingly practical, it has shaken followers for 2,000 years into living as true citizens of an upside-down kingdom. Jesus speaks with a striking urgency in the Sermon on the Mount and through the parables he told along the way. This is not a gentle suggestion for a nicer life. It's a call to action, a blueprint for a kingdom life that is alive, visible, and impossible to ignore. His message is so clear, so confrontational, that it leaves no room for half measures. In Matthew 7:24, he commands, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock." Imagine that for a moment. A life where the kingdom isn't just something you think about or talk about, but something you build your entire existence upon, stone by stone, choice by choice. But who was Jesus, and what gives him the authority to challenge us so directly? Jesus was the promised Messiah, the Son of God who stepped into our broken world to reveal the heart of the Father in flesh and blood. He wasn't always recognized as king. In fact, during his earthly ministry, many doubted him, religious leaders rejected him, crowds misunderstood him, and even his own disciples had moments of confusion and fear. But after the resurrection, everything changed. Those same doubting followers became the most dedicated disciples, carrying the kingdom message through persecution, imprisonment, and death. His life itself is a testimony to transformation, a carpenter's son, rejected by the powerful, crucified by Rome, yet rising as the victorious king who now calls us to follow. His teachings carry a weight and an authority that demands our attention. His message is not theoretical. It is the wisdom of someone who paid the ultimate price and proved the power of the kingdom is stronger than death itself. As we dive into these teachings, Jesus challenges us to examine the core of our beliefs and ask ourselves the hard questions. Are we truly living as citizens of his kingdom, or are we merely talking about it? He confronts the human tendency to be double-minded, to claim loyalty to the king, while still living by the world's rules. In Matthew 6:24, he warns, "No one can serve two masters." His words call us to a singular, unwavering commitment, a kingdom life that doesn't waver between God and the world, but stands firm in trust and obedience. In the pages of the Gospel of Matthew, we find guidance on facing trials, on handling anger, on loving enemies, on avoiding hypocrisy, and on cultivating a righteousness that goes far deeper than outward appearances. Each topic is practical, rooted in everyday experiences, yet deeply spiritual. He doesn't hold back from the uncomfortable truths. He doesn't just tell us to seek the kingdom first. He shows us what real kingdom living looks like in action. As you watch this video on deep Bible stories, consider how Jesus' words might challenge you personally. This isn't just a study of ancient teachings. It's an invitation to deepen your discipleship, to step out of comfort zones, and to embrace a life of active obedience to the King. Are you ready to let Jesus' message shake you up, to let his words push you into a more authentic, lived-out kingdom faith? When we face suffering, disappointment, or pain, How do we respond? In the opening lines of the Beatitudes, Jesus offers us a perspective so unexpected that it almost feels impossible. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3. Blessed in our spiritual poverty. For most of us, blessing is the last thing we feel when we encounter our own brokenness or the brokenness of the world around us. But Jesus insists that the kingdom is like a mustard seed, tiny, almost invisible at first, yet destined to grow into something massive when it takes root in our weakness. Imagine being one of the crowds gathered on that hillside. Many were facing Roman oppression, economic hardship, social exclusion, and the daily threat of violence because they dared to hope in the God of Israel. Jesus' words were not spoken from a place of ease. He understood suffering. He saw it all around him and would soon experience it in the most brutal way possible. Instead of offering a quick fix or an escape route, he points his listeners to a radical response, to see our trials not as dead ends, but as the very soil where the kingdom can break through and grow. Jesus explains that the poor in spirit are blessed because the kingdom already belongs to them. This isn't about merely enduring hardships. It's about embracing them as moments when the King is working deeply within us, refining our character and building a resilient faith that can stand no matter what comes. Let the kingdom's work finish its course in you, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. But let's be real, finding blessing in our spiritual poverty is hard. How often do we feel overwhelmed by our struggles, questioning the King's goodness or even his presence in the middle of the storm? Jesus knows that trials can shake us to the core. That's why he reminds us that in those moments of confusion and pain, we have a direct line to the King who gives generously to all, without finding fault. He urges us, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. Imagine that a king who doesn't scold us for needing help, but who stands ready to pour out wisdom, comfort, and guidance generously. This wisdom isn't just head knowledge. It's the King's insight into our lives, his guidance on how to navigate our challenges, his peace that surpasses understanding. It's the wisdom to see beyond our immediate pain and glimpse the work the kingdom is doing within us. Jesus wants us to understand that while trials may be painful, they are not meaningless. The King uses them to shape us, to build us, and to make us whole. Yet he warns that there's a condition to receiving this kingdom wisdom. We must ask in faith, not doubting. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Doubt here is more than fleeting uncertainty. It's a divided heart, a wavering trust in the King's goodness. Jesus calls us to a firm, unshakable faith, a faith that trusts the King's plan, even when life is falling apart, that believes the kingdom is advancing, even when we don't understand how. Consider this. The trials you're facing right now may be the very things the King is using to build you, to deepen your discipleship, to make you whole. Have you ever thought of your struggles as invitations from the King to grow closer to him? Jesus is asking us to see life's challenges not as interruptions, but as part of the King's design for us, part of his way of making us complete. What would happen if we embraced this perspective? Imagine the resilience, the peace, the strength that would emerge if instead of resisting or resenting our hardships, we saw them as tools in the King's hand, refining us for his purpose. Jesus isn't promising an easy life, but he is offering a kingdom that is strong enough to face anything, a kingdom that, like a house built on the rock, stands firm against the fiercest storms. Jesus' opening words in his teachings call us to rise above our circumstances, to find blessing in what others might see as misery, and to seek the King's wisdom with unwavering trust. This is the kind of discipleship that endures, the kind that transforms, the kind that can stand up to life's fiercest storms. As we continue through the teachings of Jesus, remember this call to blessing, to perseverance, and to unwavering faith in the midst of trials. Because, as Jesus reminds us, the King isn't just interested in helping us survive our struggles. He wants us to thrive in them, to emerge stronger. He wants us to thrive. Jesus is clear. True discipleship is more than words. In a world filled with lip service and empty promises, he challenges us to live out the kingdom with radical authenticity. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to follow the King but has no deeds of the kingdom? Can such a claim alone make us citizens of his realm? This question pierces right to the heart of the issue. Jesus isn't talking about adding a few good works to our schedule or going through religious motions. He's calling for a kingdom life that is alive, vibrant, and evident in every aspect of our lives. Imagine the seed planted in fertile soil. If that seed is healthy, if it's alive, it will eventually break through the earth, sprouting leaves and bearing fruit. But if nothing grows, if there's no visible change, we know something is wrong beneath the surface. Kingdom belonging, Jesus argues, is exactly like that. If it's real, if it's alive, then it will naturally result in action. If not, we're left with an empty shell, a claim without substance. Jesus paints a vivid picture of what he means. Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? It's a scene we can all imagine: words of kindness, well wishes, even prayers, but no action. Jesus' point is powerful and simple. A kingdom that merely feels compassion without acting on it isn't truly the kingdom at all. It's a ghost, a hollow image of what kingdom life should be. This is where Jesus becomes almost provocative. He challenges his listeners by saying, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven." He pushes us to think about what we believe and whether our actions truly reflect it, because in the end, actions speak louder than words. Jesus doesn't deny that entry into the kingdom is through grace and faith in him. He just insists that true kingdom citizenship cannot remain hidden. Like a flame in the darkness, it must shine out through our actions. The parable of the two sons provides a powerful example. Jesus asked, "What do you think? There was a man who had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work today in the vineyard.' 'I will not,' he answered. But later he changed his mind and went. Then the father went to the other son and said the same thing. He answered, 'I will, sir,' but he did not go. Which of the 2 did what his father wanted? The first one, of course. Jesus drives the point home. The tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom ahead of the religious leaders because they believed and acted, while many who said the right words never followed through. Kingdom belonging and kingdom deeds aren't separate things. They are 2 sides of the same coin. Genuine citizenship transforms the heart, and that transformed heart moves the hands and feet. It's a life that doesn't just believe in the King, but believes the King, taking him at his word, stepping out in obedience, even when it's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable. Consider another picture Jesus gives us in the Sermon on the Mount. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." This isn't just about the outward act. The kingdom goes straight to the heart. Anger we nurse in silence, insults we let fester, relationships we allow to break without lifting a finger. To reconcile these things are already destroying the life of the kingdom inside us. Let's be real. How often do we come to worship or prayer while still carrying unresolved anger towards someone close to us? Jesus doesn't sugarcoat it. He says, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. The kingdom demands we put relationships right before we put on a show of devotion. Our worship means nothing if our actions toward others contradict the love of the King. He takes it even further with the command that feels almost impossible. You have heard that it was said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Imagine that for a moment. Praying for the person who hurt you most, blessing the one who cursed you, turning the other cheek when someone slaps you. This is the upside-down reality of the kingdom, where strength is shown in meekness, and victory comes not through retaliation, but through radical, self-giving love. Jesus isn't calling us to perfection on our own strength. He's calling us to authenticity, to let the kingdom life shine through our actions, our words, and even our responses to those who wrong us. He gives us the image of salt and light. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Salt that has lost its saltiness is useless. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. If the kingdom is truly in us, it cannot stay invisible. It will season the world around us. It will shine in the darkness. It will make a difference that people can see and taste. So what about us? If someone were to look at our lives, our relationships, our social media, our workplace interactions, our family dynamics, would they see a kingdom that is active and alive? Or would they see the same patterns of anger, resentment, retaliation, and self-protection that mark the kingdoms of this world? Jesus is inviting us to examine ourselves. Is our kingdom faith truly alive? Or have we been content with a comfortable cultural version of following him that costs us nothing? This kind of kingdom living doesn't need applause or recognition. It simply flows naturally into how we treat others, how we respond in conflict, and how we love, even when it's difficult. It touches lives, heals wounds, and makes a tangible impact in a broken world. Imagine the transformation that could happen if we all took Jesus' words seriously. If every disciple lived out the kingdom with boldness, with love, and with a commitment to reflect the King in every interaction. Jesus isn't calling us to perfection, but to authenticity. He's challenging us to let the kingdom shine through our actions, to be people whose lives speak louder than their words. This is the discipleship he's talking about, a discipleship that is living, breathing, and unmistakably visible to a watching world. The question Jesus leaves us with is this: is our kingdom citizenship alive? And if it is, how will we let it shine in the way we live, love, and serve? As we continue through the teachings of Jesus, remember this call to visible action, to reconciliation, and to love that goes beyond what the world expects. Because the King isn't just interested in what we say about him. He wants a people whose lives prove they belong to him. Jesus isn't one to avoid difficult truths. And when it comes to the power of our words, he delivers a lesson as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Our words, he argues, are not just sounds or symbols. They are powerful tools that can build up the kingdom or tear it down, bless or curse, bring life or death. In Matthew 12:34 he says, "For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." The imagery Jesus uses here is striking. Imagine a single spark landing in a dry forest, a momentary flicker, seemingly insignificant. But in seconds it grows, spreading, consuming everything in its path. This, Jesus says, is the potential of our words. Just as fire can provide warmth and light, words can bring healing, encouragement, and hope. But that same fire, when uncontrolled, can destroy everything it touches, leaving scars and devastation in its wake. Words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. They take root. They spread. And they have the power to change lives, both for good and for harm. Jesus doesn't sugarcoat the challenge of controlling our speech. In fact, he points out an irony we can all relate to. We can tame wild animals and bend the natural world to our will. Yet our tongues remain stubbornly untamed. It's a humbling reality, one that reminds us of our deep need for the King's help in every area of our lives, especially in controlling our words. But why does Jesus place such emphasis on the tongue? Because our words reveal the state of our hearts. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Think about this contradiction. One moment we're worshiping the King, singing his praises, speaking of his love and truth. Then, moments later, we might speak harshly to a friend, criticize a stranger, or snap in anger. Jesus is pointing out the hypocrisy that so often creeps into our lives, and he's challenging us to consider whether our words truly reflect the kingdom we claim to belong to. Jesus understands the weight of words. He knows they are a direct expression of what's in our hearts. The kingdom, he teaches, demands deeper integrity, a discipleship that doesn't only show up in our actions, but in our language, in the way we speak to others and about others. If we claim to follow the King, then our speech should reflect his love, his grace, and his truth. The challenge Jesus presents here is one that demands constant attention. Think about how often words slip out in anger or frustration, words we later regret. Consider the times we've gossiped, spread rumors, or let negative thoughts flow freely from our lips. These moments may seem small, but Jesus reminds us that they carry weight. Every word, every phrase, every sentence has the power to uplift or to wound. Jesus doesn't leave us in despair, though. While he acknowledges the difficulty of taming the tongue, his teachings point us back to the King's strength and wisdom. Taming the tongue isn't about perfect speech or never making a mistake. It's about seeking the King's guidance in every conversation, asking for his grace to help us use our words to bring life rather than destruction. So what does this look like in daily life? It might mean pausing before responding in anger, choosing silence instead of gossip, or offering encouragement where criticism would normally flow. It's the discipline of asking ourselves, will this word bless or wound? Will it build up the kingdom or tear it down? Imagine the difference it would make if we saw every conversation as an opportunity to reflect the King's love. Jesus' challenge is not just about avoiding harmful speech, but about being intentional with our words. He invites us to become people whose words bring healing, comfort, and encouragement to others. Imagine being known as someone whose words inspire others, someone who speaks with wisdom and kindness. This is the potential of a tongue surrendered to the King, a tongue that doesn't serve its own purposes, but is an instrument of his love. Let's take a moment to reflect on our own speech. How often do our words reflect the kingdom? Do our conversations bring light or add to the darkness? Jesus' words remind us that our speech is not just a small matter. It's a reflection of our hearts, a window into our souls, and a powerful testimony of our commitment to the King. One of the most striking themes in Jesus' teachings is this question: what does it mean to have genuine kingdom wisdom? Jesus doesn't mince words here. To him, wisdom isn't just about believing the right things intellectually. It's about living in a way that shows that belief in action. In Matthew 7:24, he poses a challenging question. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Jesus pushes us beyond mere words, beyond good intentions, and even beyond private beliefs. He's calling for a discipleship that moves, a discipleship that does. He doesn't deny the importance of believing in the King. He emphasizes that trust in him is the very foundation of our citizenship. But what he's saying here is that kingdom wisdom isn't just an internal conviction. It's a force that must show up in our actions, a light that shines outward, affecting the lives of others. Jesus makes it plain: a house built on sand will fall when the storms come. Think about that. Jesus isn't saying wisdom without action is weak or insufficient. He's saying it's unstable, destined to collapse. This is a bold claim, one that challenges us to reflect on what true kingdom wisdom looks like. According to Jesus, it's not enough to profess belief in the King. Real wisdom, he says, is living in such a way that our actions confirm and testify to our trust. He uses an example that might hit close to home. Suppose someone comes to you in need, hungry, struggling, overwhelmed. If you respond with well wishes and empty blessings, but do nothing to help, what good is that? Jesus tells us this isn't what kingdom wisdom looks like. This isn't about earning our way into the kingdom. Instead, he's challenging us to recognize that genuine wisdom naturally produces good fruit. It's like a tree that bears fruit. If the tree is healthy, if it's rooted in the King's soil, then fruit will appear naturally. In the same way, if our wisdom is real, then compassion, generosity, and kindness should flow from it. Jesus gives us another picture, drawing from the everyday realities his listeners knew. The wise person builds on the rock, listening and obeying, while the foolish person builds on sand, hearing but never acting. The storm comes to both. The difference is what remains standing. Jesus also highlights how kingdom wisdom stands in complete contrast to the wisdom of the world. The world's wisdom is filled with envy and selfish ambition, chasing success by any means necessary. It praises cleverness without compassion, ambition without acknowledging the cost. Jesus calls this kind of thinking unstable, leading to disorder and every evil practice. Where envy and selfish ambition exist, there you find chaos. But the wisdom that comes from the King is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Each of these qualities reflects the heart of the King himself. True wisdom isn't about winning arguments or advancing our own agendas. It's about living a life that honors the king and blesses others. Imagine a wisdom that is pure, no hidden motives, no selfish ambition. From this purity flows peace instead of conflict, mercy instead of judgment, sincerity instead of pretense. This kind of wisdom seeks to make peace rather than stir division. It brings healing instead of harm. It's wisdom that brings people together instead of tearing them apart. What Jesus is really describing here is a wisdom rooted in the character of the King. Every attribute points us back to Jesus, who embodied all these qualities perfectly. He reached out to the marginalized, spoke truth boldly yet graciously, and offered mercy, even to those who wronged him. When Jesus calls us to seek this wisdom, he's calling us to imitate the King, to let his example shape our actions, our words, and our relationships. This wisdom results in good fruit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. True kingdom wisdom naturally produces these qualities in our lives. It shows up in how we treat others, how we respond in difficult situations, and how we choose to use our influence. But here's the challenge. Seeking this wisdom requires humility. In a world that prizes pride, achievement, and self-assurance, humility can feel like weakness. Yet Jesus assures us that true wisdom is found in humble submission to the King. He encourages us to approach the King in prayer, to ask for this wisdom, and to trust that the King gives generously to all without finding fault. Seeking kingdom wisdom begins with recognizing our own limitations and admitting our need for the King's guidance. Jesus' teaching here calls us to re-evaluate how we define success, influence, and even intelligence. In a world that often celebrates quick wit, personal ambition, and cleverness, Jesus reminds us that true wisdom has nothing to do with impressing others or gaining status. It's about living a life that honors the King and serves others, a life marked by love, humility, and peace. It prioritizes relationships over recognition, character over comfort, and faithfulness over fame. As we move deeper into Jesus' teachings, we sense the tension building. The King is calling us to a choice that will define our relationship with him and our ability to stand firm against life's fiercest challenges. In Matthew 6:33, he presents a powerful truth about true victory and freedom. It is found not in our own strength or striving, but in wholehearted submission to the King and resistance to the pull of the world. This passage confronts us with a question: who will we surrender to, and whose authority will shape our lives? Jesus opens this section with a command that carries both challenge and promise. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Seek first the kingdom. This is not a passive hope for someday. It's an intentional alignment of our will with his, a choice to place the King's priorities above our own worries, ambitions, and fears. To seek the kingdom first is to acknowledge that the King knows best, that his ways are higher than ours, and that he is both our sovereign and our loving Father. But notice that Jesus pairs this submission with active resistance. It's only when we seek the kingdom first that we have the strength to stand against the world's ways. In this teaching, Jesus reveals the paradox of kingdom power. True strength is found in surrender. The world may tell us to rely on ourselves, to fight in our own strength, to chase security through possessions and status. But Jesus shows us that victory comes through a humble heart yielded to the King. When we seek his kingdom first, we are not giving up, we are giving over. We are saying, King, I trust you to fight for me, to lead me, and to provide for me. And when we stand under the King's authority, the power of anxiety, fear, and worldly ambition is broken. Jesus promises that as we seek first the kingdom, all these things will be given to you as well. How do we seek the kingdom practically? Jesus' next words are the key. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. He invites us into an intimate trust with the King, assuring us that when we draw close to him, he draws close to us. This is the foundation of kingdom victory, remaining in the King's presence, anchored in his truth, strengthened by his love. In a world full of distractions, seeking the kingdom first requires intentionality. It means carving out time to seek him in prayer, to listen to his voice through his words, and to quiet our hearts before him. Jesus goes on to address the posture we must take before the King, calling us to examine our hearts. No one can serve two masters, he had warned earlier. This call to single-hearted devotion is about removing the barriers that keep us from experiencing the kingdom fully. To be double-minded is to be torn between the world's values and the King's values. But Jesus invites us to embrace wholehearted allegiance. This is how we resist the world, by aligning every part of ourselves with the King's will, renouncing anything that pulls us away from him. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus emphasizes the seriousness of this repentance. He calls us to a heart that mourns over sin and chooses the narrow way. These are strong words, but they reflect a profound truth. Genuine repentance is not a casual acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It is a deep recognition of our need for the King's mercy. To grieve over our divided hearts is to understand the weight of our choices, to see how they can wound others, separate us from the King, and hinder his work in our lives. When we approach the King with a broken and contrite heart, we open ourselves to his healing and restoration. Finally, Jesus concludes this call to submission and resistance with a promise that encapsulates the heart of the kingdom's character. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Here, Jesus assures us that humility is not about remaining low, but about allowing the King to raise us up. When we humble ourselves, we create space for the King's grace to work powerfully in our lives. In a world that often sees humility as weakness, Jesus shows us that humility is the pathway to true kingdom strength. As we lay down our pride, our self-reliance, and our ambitions, the King lifts us up, not in the way the world might expect, but in a way that fills us with his peace, his purpose, and his power. Imagine what our lives would look like if we fully embraced this call to seek the kingdom first and resist the ways of the world. When we choose to humble ourselves, we place ourselves under the King's protection, and we find that the battles we face are no longer ours to fight alone. We discover that the King's presence is with us, that his Spirit strengthens us, and that his promises sustain us. This is the path to true freedom, the freedom to live as the King's beloved, victorious citizens. As we reach the end of these teachings of Jesus in Matthew, we find ourselves challenged, encouraged, and, if we're honest, maybe even a bit shaken. Jesus has held up a mirror, asking us to look closely at our lives and consider whether our discipleship is reflected in our actions, our words, and our relationships. This message calls us to a higher, truer kingdom life, a life that isn't content with merely believing, but insists on transforming us from the inside out. Jesus leaves us with powerful reminders to face trials with the blessing of the kingdom, knowing they shape us into the people the King created us to be. To approach each day with a commitment to seek his kingdom first rather than seeking recognition for ourselves. To care for the vulnerable, guard our tongues, replace judgment with compassion, and love even our enemies. And finally, to remember that a house built on sand will fall, urging us to make our lives a testimony of the kingdom's love and grace in action. As we close this journey, the message of Jesus is clear. Genuine discipleship doesn't just stay in our hearts. It moves into our hands, our voices, and our choices. It challenges us to be doers of the King's words, not hearers only, and invites us to build a life that's rooted in action, grounded in humility, and overflowing with love. So as you carry this message forward, ask yourself, how will my life look different because of these words? What small, tangible step can I take today to live out the kingdom Jesus so passionately imparts? The teachings of Jesus in Matthew offer no easy answers, but they do give us a roadmap to a life of integrity, purpose, and devotion, a life of discipleship that doesn't just profess but practices, a life that truly transforms. Stay blessed.